And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, the gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is March 27th, the 86th day of the year. Just 279 days till the year is over with. Holidays and observances. World Theater Day. International Whiskey Day. Pick out your favorite brand, get a bottle, and go sit in the corner. National Spanish Paella Day. Bitter Ballin' Day. International Scribble Day. National Viagra Day. National Acoustic Soul Day. International Medical Science Liaison Day. World Ad Tech Day. Quirky Country Music Song Titles Day. Major League Baseball Opening Day. Great British Spring Cleaning. Now, there's a whole lot more holidays and observances, but after asking me to do it, you all have said I'm doing too much. So, at this point, we're going to stop talking about all the holidays and observances. We're going to go back to talking about some unsolved mysteries, and there's a lot of them, folks, let me tell you. You know, if you read like I do, I try to read a book a day, you will have read about weeping and bleeding statues. Now, they're encountered worldwide. You know, statues that weep and bleed and drink milk and display other miraculous behaviors are known around the world and throughout history. So the question is, are they pious frauds or some form of divine intervention? You know, religious mysteries constitute an entire separate category of their own. Appetite for incursions to the supernatural world into the natural one seems to be a very ancient urge. In the classical era, statues regularly wept, among other prodigious feats, abilities linked to the widespread belief that gods and spirits could readily inhabit the statues made in their honor. One particularly notable example is the statue of Apollo at Cumae. Ancient writer Julius Obsequens said that at 130 BC, a statue of Apollo wept for 4 days, which the early Christian philosopher Augustine later adduced as evidence that the demonic pagan gods were already mourning their coming demise well in advance of the arrival of Jesus. Classical era had its skeptics and mythbusters, of course. For example, Cicero attempted to rationalize the wetness of sweating statues as nothing more than condensation. Well, the spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire, with its prohibitions on idol worship, might have been expected to put a stop to the antics of statues, especially the religious statues. But in fact, Christian images and statues proved to be just as active as the pagan ones. In the 6th century, St. Gregory of Tours reported that weeping statues are being used to win converts to Christianity. And medieval pilgrims to the Holy Land reported encountering weeping icons. The habit spread into Europe as well. The Austrian Emperor Leopold I acquired from Rzapovich, northeastern Hungary, a Madonna and Child icon that began weeping in 1715. It was itself a copy of an icon that had been weeping for over 10 years. An even earlier icon from Kokochovo in Slovakia had been weeping since 1670. Well, bleeding was another favorite stunt indulged in by religious images. One famous account concerns a miraculous painting of the Virgin Mary of Mantua in northern Italy, which was stolen in the 17th century and used by early gun nuts for target practice. When it was struck by a bullet, it began to bleed from its wound, and it's said that the painting, which is now kept in Prague, still bleeds to this day. You know, the Modern wave of weeping statues began in earnest in the 1970s and 1980s, with the vast majority concerning statues of the Blessed Virgin Mary, also known as the BVM. Now, the Blessed Virgin Mary has a long history in Catholicism of being featured in apparitions and visions, often described shedding a tear for the sins of humanity and the awful fate that awaits the world if sinners fail to repent and return to the correct path of religion. Similar motives, of course, are attributed to weeping statues of the Virgin Mary and also of the less popular weeping Jesus statues. Countries that have reported weeping Blessed Virgin Mary or Jesus statues since the 1970s, including Australia, Bangladesh, Benin, Bolivia, Canada, Ecuador, Haiti, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Philippines, Puerto Rico, Romania, Russia, Spain, Syria, Trinidad, even here in the U.S., as well as Venezuela. A similar list of countries have also reported having bleeding statues. Weeping Blessed Virgin Marys often shed tears of oil rather than salty water, placing their exudates in a long tradition of holy oil. According to the faithful, this oil is of divine provenance, but on occasions when samples have been collected and tested, they generally prove to be olive oil or some other vegetable oil. The blood shed by statues has also been analyzed on numerous occasions. In those cases where it's proven to be human blood, the faithful claim it's the blood of Mary or Jesus, respectively. Although it is notable that when gender can be determined, it often matches that of the owner of the statue, not the statue itself. The skeptical point of view is that these active statues are all forms of fraud, although many may be pious frauds, which is where they're perpetrated by the faithful, either unconsciously or in order to serve a pious end, such as reinforcing the faith and making converts. In most cases, tears and oil and blood are probably applied by hand, but Italian skeptic Luigi Carlicelli famously proposed a simple mechanism. What's needed is a hollow statue made of a porous material such as plaster or ceramic, glazed or painted with some sort of impermeable coating and filled up with a liquid. If the glazing is imperceptibly scratched around the eyes, tear-like drops will leak out. This trick proved to be very satisfactory, baffling all the onlookers. Some findings have led to creative interpretations, of course. Blood from a bleeding Virgin Mary statue belonging to noted stigmatic Sister Agnes Sasagawa of Akita in Japan in 1973 was found to contain 3 different blood types. A bishop suggested it was blood from all 3 members of the Trinity, although he didn't record the likely reaction of God and the Holy Spirit to the discovery that they had corporeal forms. In another case, blood from a statue of Jesus found to be female, prompting documentary maker Michael Walisi to claim it was only to be expected given Jesus' virgin birth, which meant he only had a female parent. Whatever may be the final determination about these bleeding statues, it's not a recent event. Well, from bleeding statues, let's talk about PBCs. Phantom big cats. They've been found in Britain and Europe and America and even in Australia. Out-of-place big cats have been reported with amazing frequency in the British Isles and beyond since the 1960s. But the official position, of course, is that there are no feral big cats in Britain. Experts, of course, are divided on the issue. They're variously known as phantom big cats, out-of-place animals, mystery cats, or in those most involved in the field, alien, in the sense of being non-native big cats, or even ABCs. The phenomenon's epicenter is Britain, but ABCs have been reported in most of Europe and Australia and parts of America where big cats no longer believed to be present in the wild. A typical ABC report describes a panther-like feline, usually around the size of a Labrador. Black fur, although tawny fur, is also fairly common. Occasionally, reports speak about creatures resembling a lynx or a lion without a mane, which would be a female. But there are a few reports of big cats with spots and stripes and even big manes. The prevalence and frequency of these reports is high, especially in Britain. Between April 2004 and July 2005, for instance, the British Big Cat Society recorded 2,123 big cat sightings. Now, as well as sightings, farmers often report livestock depredations that appear not to match typical patterns of killing by wild predators or stray dogs, particularly noting so-called clean kills where elements such as fur removal and bites to the neck seem to match big cat habits. In addition, there have been many identification of tracks and spores said to belong to big cats. The ABC as a media phenomena dates back to the flap about the Surrey puma in the 1960s. This was a large, tawny feline seen in the English county of Surrey by numerous witnesses, described as resembling a puma, also known as a mountain lion or a cougar. Despite extensive searches and continued witness sightings into the 1970s, the Surrey puma was never tracked down. 1983, a new ABC came on the scene, the Beast of Exmoor. Identified as a black panther, but also linked to reports of creatures resembling a puma or a lynx. Many other British ABCs followed, included the Dartmoor Beast and, most infamously, the Beast of Bodmin Moor, the focus of a 1995 government investigation. The believers in ABCs generally point to the introduction in Britain of the Dangerous Wild Animals Act of 1976. This meant that it was now mandatory to get a license for keeping a big cat as a pet, which in turn meant a great deal of effort and expense. It is possible that many owners decided surreptitiously to turn their now illegal pets loose into the wild, providing an obvious source for the small population of feral ABCs. The theory is that ABCs have hybridized with each other or domestic cats to create a viable long-term feral population of large wild cats. Of course, skeptics point to a host of problems with these theories. First, big cats such as pumas generally don't live more than 15 years, so sustaining a feral population after 1991 would require a fairly large number of animals with lairs and territories. Secondly, there's a notorious difficulty in judging scale and distance for even the most apparently capable witnesses. Official study into the Beast of Bodmin, for instance, concluded the animals reported were actually normal-sized domestic cats. Thirdly, skeptics dispute the hybridization theory, pointing out that a panther family big cat only cross-mate if reared together, while hybrids produced with domestic cats would be neither feral or fertile nor particularly large. And fourth is the issue of melanism. Majority of ABC reports are of black animals, but melanism of leopards and jaguars is incredibly rare and not known in pumas. ABCs are released leopards and pumas. Jaguars are not normally kept as pets. Why are so many of them melanistic, meaning they're black? Lastly, and seemingly most damningly, skeptics say there's no hard evidence in the form of dead animals, live captures, or unambiguous spoor and trails. But not all these objections are well-founded. In fact, there's a surprising amount of hard evidence for ABCs with many dead specimens, at least one Eurasian lynx, and several smaller felines such as jungle cats and leopard cats, and a living puma, and lynx have been captured. Black panthers, of course, remain elusive. And one of the problems facing ABC researchers is that little is straightforward in the field. Typical media flap involves witness reports followed by fruitless searches by police and animal control, followed by further reports till eventually the flap dies down with no clear conclusion. In addition, ABC reports are often not restricted to straightforward sightings of real-world animals, but include weird and paranormal elements such as eerie sensations and UFO sightings and ghostly appearances and disappearances and natural characteristics such as flaming eyes. On top of this, elements of the ABC community developed conspiracy theories accusing the authorities of suppressing the truth about phantom cats for their own dark ends. You know, if you happen to step out of your house and see a puma sunning itself in your driveway, very few people would think to get out your camera, even though anybody with a cell phone has a camera. A few pictures would be very, very helpful in any further investigations. Well, something equally as puzzling as ABCs are the ubiquitous crop circles. They date from about the 1970s. And we're going to look at Wiltshire, England. You know, patterns and fields of crops have appeared frequently since the 1970s, but the question is, are they landscape art, hoaxes, messages from aliens, or evidence of unknown natural forces? The modern crop circle phenomenon is usually traced back to Queensland, Australia, in the year 1966. Small, rough circles of flattened plants appear, with local UFO investigators nicknamed Saucer Nest. Some people claim to have seen UFOs rising from them, but these early circles may have even older antecedents, the work of a destructive mowing devil. This engaging imp was identified in a 1678 woodcut pamphlet published in England entitled The Mowing Devil, or Strange News out of Hertfordshire. Pamphlet told about a farmer who rashly declared, on refusing to pay the fee demanded by a laborer, that he'd rather the devil mowed his field instead. Well, mysterious flames appeared over the field that night. Next day, the crop had been so nearly mowed by the devil or some infernal spirit that no mortal man would be able to do the same thing. It's particularly striking for modern crop circle researchers is that the woodcut illustration, which shows a devil hard at work with a scythe, depicts the crops being cut in the concentric circles, really suggesting supernatural agency has been ascribed to an early example of what became known as the crop circle phenomena. First crop circles started to appear in fields in southern England in 1975, but the media didn't jump on the bandwagon until the 1980. That same year, a pattern of 3 circles appeared, and each successive summer saw the appearance of an increasingly complex and intricate patterns. Most of the circles appeared within a relatively small area. Alton in Wiltshire, England, near the Alton Barnes White Horse. Normally, crop circles appear overnight, but some people claim to have seen them being formed. Crop circle patterns now include rings and symbols and lattices of straight and curved lines, even complex mathematical generated fractal shapes. Now, the growing enthusiasm for crop circles engendered new cultural tribes, of course. Circle makers claim to be the ones creating the circles, used as a kind of landscape art experiment. Crop watchers, or croppies as they're called, kept watch for crop circles being formed. They hung out in local pubs and were often suspected of close links to the circle makers. Serologist, also spelled serologist, tried to study the phenomena scientifically, hoping to identify previously unknown natural phenomena at work. Although many used fringe science and New Age techniques such as dowsing, and all 3 of these groups have reported strange phenomena associated with crop circles, including earth lights, which are mystery lights that seem to be linked to geology, tingling sensations and shocks big enough to knock people over, healing powers, and even UFO and ghost sightings. Well, in 1991, a pair of artists and UFO enthusiasts from Southampton, Doug Bauer and Dave Quarley, claimed to have created all the initial crop circles as a joke. They admitted to hoaxing approximately 250 circles over the years, having been inspired by the Queensland saucer nest of the 1960s. And they claimed to use just their feet, and later they said they used a plank of wood with a rope attached, known as a stalk stopper, to make the circles. Well, it soon became apparent that there were other circle-making groups with names like the Bill Bailey Gang or Merlin and Company and Spider-Man and Catwoman. Their motives were mischievous and artistic. Between them, the circle makers claimed responsibility for nearly every single circle. Well, it now seems likely that almost all the crop circles were man-made, but some mysteries still remain. Who or what created the initial saucer nest? Why do man-made circles appear to produce paranormal phenomena? And why do so many people continue to insist that most crop circles are not man-made? A significant number of croppies and serologists reject the claims of the hoaxers. When crop circles first appeared, one of the initial theories to gain support was that UFOs are creating the circles, either when landing or taking off, or as some kind of message to mankind. Skeptics point out that crop glyphs make for a low-bandwidth medium. Meteorologist Dr. Terrence Maiden, who became a leading serologist, initially suggested the circles are made by small whirlwinds or dust devils, formed by the wind eddying around the sides of hills. And as the formation became more complex, they elaborated on this theory, of course. Maybe the small whirlwinds generated their own electric charge, becoming plasma vortices, or in other words, tiny tornadoes of hot electrically charged gas. He claimed that such vortices would leave complex patterns of spirals and rings. And his theory received dramatic support in 1991 when a couple claimed to have been in the middle of a circle that was created. They heard a high-pitched whine and were pressed to the ground by a powerful wind as their hair stood on end, exactly like Maiden's theory predicted. By now, though, patterns involving complex symbols were appearing, and clearly some sort of intelligence was behind the crop circles. Well, for the true believers, of course, aliens were back in the frame, and maybe some kind of natural or cosmic intelligence. But the two individuals with their boards claiming to go around the world creating crop circles, now that particular theory I find kind of silly. Well, for 20 years, from 1998 to 2000, I did ghost tours here in El Paso. This is the most haunted city in the country. And quite often when I took photographs, I've got pictures of orbs. Well, these blobs or spots and circles of light visible in photographs are emanations of the spirit world, according to believers, although skeptics have far more mundane explanations. Now, these orbs, known as balls of light or BOLs, have been hailed by many in the ghost hunting and spiritualist community as proof of life after death, unknown energy phenomenon, existence of ghosts. A typical orb is a bright spot of light caught on a photograph, not visible with the naked eye when the photograph was taken. And they vary greatly in size and composition. Variants in the orb include similar but less circular shapes, labeled rods or light slugs and vortices. They're particularly commonly found at popular ghost hunting sites such as haunted houses and sometimes cemeteries. Some believers suggest these orbs are energy signatures of a paranormal phenomenon such as a haunting. Others claim to see faces or messages in the orbs, which supports claims they're discarnate spirits or media for communications with these spirits. The orb phenomena properly kicked off with the advent of widely available digital photography in the 1990s. It's coincided with the emergence of the internet as a global forum, and the orb meme propagated and thrived in cyberspace. A whole subculture of orb photography and belief emerged, and there have been courses offered in orb photography. When I was, 14 or 15, my parents bought a new house. We were the first ones to occupy the house, and it was built on the edge of what had been an ancient Indian camp. Well, one night I was lying in bed, and there appeared in the middle of the room a green orb that proceeded to fly about the room doing aerobatics and cartwheels. Went down behind my TV, and after that, that TV would not work in that room anymore. It'd work any place else in the house, but not in that room. You know, the skeptics, the popularity, and to an even greater extent, the endurance of the meme is baffling, because orbs are one of the most easily debunked of paranormal phenomena, probably rating as the least mysterious topic we'll be talking about. But I will point out, a number of people tried to debunk the orb that appeared in my room that night. Never could. I even had fish disappear out of my aquarium. I'd be found stuffed in drawers, wrapped up in clothing. It's been convincingly demonstrated over and over that orbs are artifices of photography created when light, usually from a flash, reflects off particles in the atmosphere, bounces off objects such as camera straps, is reflected within the camera lenses or some combination of all these. But there's another class of these orbs that absolutely are unexplainable. And the first explanation is probably the most common. The air is full of particles of dust and spores and insects and tiny droplets of water and myriad other types. As digital cameras became popular and accessible, they usually took the form of compact cameras where the flash is close to the lens. Apart from causing the well-known phenomenon of red eye, this also heightens the chance of catching on camera artifacts of flash usage. Sites where ghost hunters most assiduously seek orbs are just those where the large amounts of atmospheric debris are common, such as dusty old houses or damp graveyards. How about a bedroom that was very comfortable, temperature-wise? Not a lot of dust mites in the air. The sites where these things appear can't be an explanation for all of them. Anybody can readily capture orbs on camera for themselves by taking a flash picture on a rainy night or in a dusty room. And to produce an orb, the reflective particle usually needs to be close to the lens, which accounts for the fact that orbs are rarely seen obscured by or emerging from behind background objects. Now, given the ease and popularity with which the orb phenomenon has been debunked, maybe the true mystery of orbs is why so many people still believe they're paranormal. The answer lies in human psychology and was articulated at least as early as 1875 by medium William Stanton Moses. He commented on people's gullibility when it came to so-called spirit photos. He said some folks would recognize anything as a ghost. A broom and a sheet are quite enough for wild enthusiasts to go with the figure in their eye and see what they want to see. I've had photos that might be anything in this or any other world sent to me and gravely claimed as recognizable portraits. The will to believe has often proven to be insurmountable by evidence or rational argument. Same year that Moses talked about wild enthusiasts, infamous spirit photographer Jean Bouget was convicted of fraud after confessing and having his stock of fake heads displayed in court. Nevertheless, many of those duped by him continued to insist not only he was genuine, but so were the photographs he'd faked. Orbs visible to the naked eye have been linked to a related phenomenon known as earth lights. These are usually points or balls of light seen moving with no apparent cause or origin, often associated with particular spots, such as the Hesteland lights in Norway or the Longindale lights in Derbyshire, England. One theory is that they're forms of ball lightning, which are spears of plasma, ionized gas, created by piezoelectric effects, where pressure generates an electrical current on a quartz crystal and rock, which is under pressure at geological faults or boundaries. Also known as spook lights and ghost lights. Earth lights can vary in color and shape, been reported making sounds, leaving trails, even exploding. All phenomena which you can also see with ball lightning. Some people insist there's some form of intelligence behind earth lights which appear to interact with observers. Well, for the next few shows, to investigate 7 extraordinary objects of 2 types. Those that allegedly possess incredible powers and those that confound the archaeological record and resist conventional explanation. Technology that's out of time and which threatens to overturn traditional understanding of history. The Fuente Magna bowl is a large stone dish allegedly discovered from an ancient pre-Columbian site in Bolivia, and it appears to bear inscriptions in writing similar to the cuneiform of ancient Mesopotamia. Now, if it's real, which of course is up for debate, seems to back up the contention of transatlantic cultural exchange long before Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Also resisting decipherment of the inscriptions on the Phaistos disc, a clay tablet from ancient Minoan site printed with strange hieroglyphics, thousands of years before printing was thought to have been invented. And of course, we've got the Voynich manuscript, which we'll talk about, a medieval book of weird and wonderful illustrations. Now, let's not forget the Baghdad Battery. Well, the Fuente Magna bowl was found in La Paz, Bolivia, and it dates either from 2500 BC or 1958 AD. Now, this is a large bowl, allegedly discovered near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, and it's said to bear ancient Old World writings suggesting transatlantic links at least 4,000 years before Columbus was ever thought about. It's a large dish or bowl, apparently made out of an earthen reddish stone, engraved with drawings of human and animal motifs and marks said to resemble cuneiform writing. The Spanish word fuente means bowl or source, and the Fuente Magna is described as the location where the bowl was found. Although a more plausible explanation is simply that it means big bowl. Main source of information on the Fuente Magna is an online article apparently translated from Spanish and disseminated widely across the world by 2 independent investigators from Bolivia, Bernardo Biados and Freddy Acra. They call him the bowl was first discovered by accident at the Chua Hacienda near Lake Titicaca, about 47 miles from La Paz, and came to the attention of Bolivian archaeologist Don Max Portugal around 1958. He was said to have rescued the bowl and attempted repairs on it, but it wasn't until the late 1970s it was suggested the marks on the bowl are actually cuneiform writing. Around 2000, Phaistos and Arca visited La Paz's Museo de Metals Preciosos, also known as the Museum of Gold, where the bowl now resides, tried to follow up the account of the bowl's recovery. Traveling to the presumed location of Chua, they tracked down a 98-year-old man named Maximiliano who recognized the bowl of the photo of the Fuente Magna as the bowl he had once used as a dish for pig feed many decades before. He directed him to the site from which he claimed it had been found, which turned out to be an area of mounds that might be the remains of step ziggurats or step pyramids, areas close to the ruins of the ancient civilization of Tiwanaku. Phaistos and Acra also claimed to have discovered in 2002 a 6.5-foot high monolithic idol, which they call the Bacodia monolith, which bears cuneiform-like inscriptions. The apparent significance of the Fuente Magna bowl is that the marks on it have been identified as a variety of ancient Old World writing systems. Dr. Alberto Marini first suggested the marks are cuneiform writing in an ancient Sumerian style. More recently, the marks have been identified by American anthropologist Hugh Bernard Fox as ancient Phoenician writing. Arbiados and Acra sent photos of the bowl to Dr. Clyde Winters, who identified it as Proto-Sumerian cuneiform dating to about 3000 BC. Winters even translated the inscription, which begins, "Girls take an oath to act justly," this place. This is a favorable oracle of the people. Send forth a just divine decree. The charm, the Fuente Magna, is full of good. When his translation suggests the inscriptions concern the ritual use of the dish, which is probably to pour libations, offerings to a deity or an idol, maybe the very Pocati monolith that Phaistos discovered. If any of these identifications are accurate, this artifact would be the single greatest archaeological discovery in the Americas, maybe of all time. If Phaistos called the bowl the Rosetta Stone of the Americas, mainstream chronology, the first contact between New and Old World civilizations outside the far north and North America came in 1492 when Columbus went on his sailing trip. But there is a thriving subculture in fringe archaeology and alternative or pseudo-history which investigates evidence that transatlantic contact goes much further back. Winters, for instance, is a firm believer that very ancient, even prehistoric links between the Old and New World. Fox argues that the precious metal mines of Bolivia correspond to biblical locations such as Tarshish or Ophir, from which King Solomon traded. Now, there's several other New World artifacts said to bear cuneiform inscriptions. Well, their evidence includes the supposed presence of coca residue in ancient Egyptian mummies. Phoenician coins are apparently discovered in the Americas. Similarities between the iconography of ancient South American pottery and ancient Greek art, and a variety of cultural similarities between the Old and New World civilizations, such as measurement units, monumental architecture, funeral rites, and even boat building. In fact, the supposed similarities between reed boats constructed by ancient Egyptians on the Nile and those still built on Lake Titicaca suggest an obvious mode of transport by which transatlantic communication was effected. Seaworthiness of ocean-going reed boats and the plausibility of transatlantic crossings in them were dramatically demonstrated by Norwegian adventurer Thor Heyerdahl and his Ra expeditions in 1969 and 1970. One suggestion is that Fuente Magna inscriptions back up an earlier theory that Aymara, the language spoken by the indigenous people of Bolivia's Altiplano regions, were related to ancient Sumerian. Both are what are known as agglutinative languages. South American words such as Inca may actually be related to the Sumerian terms such as Inki, the name of a major Sumerian deity meaning great lord. Now, mainstream archaeology has taken little notice of the Fuente Magna bowl. It's generally dismissed as a fake. Archaeologist Keith Fitzpatrick Matthews, who runs the Bad Archaeology blog, points out sources for the Fuente Magna bowl are generally recycled versions of the same translated article, and even this account makes clear the provenance of the artifact is suspect at best. Earliest evidence of the bowl is 1958. There's no record of the site mentioned as its origin or its discoverers. Phaistos' provenances for the bowl seem to rest on recollections from a barely identified 98-year-old man. As for the markings, while they may resemble cuneiform, Fitzpatrick Matthews points out they don't resemble it that much, but do look like somebody ineptly trying to copy cuneiform. Evidently indistinct enough to support at least three different interpretations, Sumerian, Proto-Sumerian, and Phoenician, by three different historians. The rest of the iconography, one more time, iconography on the bowl is said to match that of a Tiwanaku culture, which dates to around 100 to 1000 AD, some 3,000 years after ancient Sumeria. The real agenda behind many alternative historical claims made about the Fuente Magna bowl is to support the case for Atlantean origin, with roots in the legendary island empire of Atlantis, for ancient Indo-American civilizations, and for the common origin account of supposed similarities between Old and New World civilizations. Lake Titicaca, for instance, sits at the epicenter of an unlikely but vigorous school of thought, placing Atlantis on the Bolivian Altiplano. Well, Ignatius Donnelly, the godfather of modern Atlantean studies, who wrote his epos while serving as a city congressman, leaned heavily on similarities between the Old and New World, such as sun worship and pyramids, as a keystone of his argument that ancient civilizations shared a common origin in Atlantis. And there's also a darker side to theories of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact, which can be abused by those who wish to argue that Native American claims to the New World could be superseded if it could be proven that Old World cultures settled there first and founded the great New World civilizations. I've heard many arguments about the pre-existence of functioning civilizations prior to the first natives come wandering across the so-called land bridge at Bering Straits. Well, on the Fuente Magna bowl, let's talk about the Phaistos disc, which came from Phaistos in southern Crete, about 1700 BC. It's an enigmatic clay disc, block printed with hieroglyphs in an indecipherable, unknown script. It's unique in the ancient world, about 2,500 years ahead of its time. Now, it's a small clay disc recovered during a dig at Phaistos, the site of an ancient Minoan palace on the south coast of Crete, about 6.5 inches across and half-inch thick. It's described on both sides with spiral patterns of symbols and lines, with the latter grouping the former into boxes, apparently separating the symbols into words. This was found in 1908 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier, along with several clay tablets. But there was something extremely special about this find. It had been deliberately fired, the process for which soft clay is baked hard, giving permanence to the marks made on it. And like the clay tablets usually found in Minoan palaces, which are only baked when the palaces in which they had been kept or discarded burned down, what's truly extraordinary is that it had been printed using the technology of block printing, on which specially carved stamps are pressed into wet clay. And judging by the layer in which it was found and other items buried alongside it, the disc has been confidently dated about 1700 BC. But the technology of block printing wasn't known anywhere else in the world until it appeared in China in the 9th century, or about 2,500 years later. Even more strangely, the hieroglyphs on the disc don't belong to any known writing system. Debate rages over whether they even resemble or any contemporary scripts, making the Phaistos disc instantly mysterious because it's incomprehensible. One of the great mysteries of the Bronze Age archaeology, the Phaistos disc has inspired a bewildering array of interpretations and translations. The writing on the disc is in the form of pictograms and symbols resembling hieroglyphs. It's arranged in a line that spirals in clockwise from the outer edge of the disc to the center, or maybe the other way around, although the fact that the system seems to be more squashed together in the center suggests that somebody began printing it from the outside and started running out of space as it got close to the center. Vertical lines between groups of symbols are generally assumed to be word dividers, and although there are 241 characters divided into what's supposed to be 61 words on the disc, many are repeated, so that only 45 different glyphs or symbols are present. Now, these are probably too many to be an alphabet, where each symbol equates to one letter or sound, but too few to be an ideographic script, where each symbol represents a whole word. So it's generally accepted that the signs are syllables, perhaps with some ideograms thrown in as well. The three other scripts found in ancient Minoan remains are Linear A, Linear B, and Cretan hieroglyphic. Both linear scripts use similar symbols, but encode for different languages. Languages written down with Linear A have never been deciphered, so Linear A inscriptions can't be read. The Linear B was deciphered in 1953 and shown to be an early form of Greek. Cretan hieroglyphic predates both the linear scripts, but is known from relatively few instances, and it also can't be deciphered. Although some signs seem to be plain enough, since they depict commodities such as sheep, sometimes with numbers next to them. The conventional view is the Phaistos disc script resembles none of the other Minoan scripts and is completely unique, Meaning only these 45 symbols are available to scholars, making it impossible to decipher. For instance, in his 1990 book, The Phaistos Disc, The Enigma of an Aegean Script, Louis Goddard argues that no definite comparison between the signs on the disc and the syllabograms of the three known Cretan scripts, hieroglyphs, linear A and linear B. Now, not everybody agrees, of course. Some scholars argue there are clear similarities between some of the Phaistos symbols and symbols from linear A and Cretan hieroglyphic. For example, the object known as the Archilachori axe, or decorative double axe, or labris, found in 1934 on Crete and dated to the 2nd millennium BC, is inscribed with signs, some of which are said to resemble linear A and some Phaistos disc symbols. Some of the more typical ancient Minoan tablets found at Phaistos can also be interpreted as sharing some symbols with the disc. Similarities between some linear A symbols and Phaistos ones have led to the suggestion that the Phaistos script is similar to more decorative elaborations of linear A, although this really doesn't help in trying to translate it. There are also similarities between the Phaistos symbols and other contemporary and near-contemporary Bronze Age Mediterranean writing, leading to interpretations of Phaistos text in terms of Egyptian hieroglyphics, hieroglyphic Luwian and Proto-Biblic script, star map, teaching, and, of course, magical curse and religious ritual, proof of a geometric theorem, even a prayer. These are all among the many interpretations of the Phaistos disc. Ideas considered the more plausible by mainstream archaeology include the disc as a calendar, maybe even a part of a board game. For instance, chase games, such as which game pieces chase each other along a board like today's snakes and ladders, are known from the Bronze Age, and the ancient Egyptians, who interacted heavily with the Minoans, had a board game called Mian, or the coiled one, which might link to the spiral nature of the text on the disc. These ancient game boards are often two-sided, just like the disc. 1999, Jerome Eisenberg, an American art historian, art dealer, and expert on ancient forgeries, suggested the whole affair was a hoax. Did an article in The Economist where he argued, in my opinion, having studied the Phaistos disc at length some 30 years ago, the reason they've been deciphered and its symbols don't relate to in any way whatever to any other known script is simple. It's a forgery. It's a joke perpetrated by a clever archaeologist from the Italian mission to Crete upon his fellow excavators. He's talking about Pernier, of course, and Pernier's motive was to compete with contemporary headline-grabbing discoveries of Arthur Evans at Knossos. Eisenberg argues that Crete's Herodian Archaeological Museum can settle the issue by doing a thermoluminescence test, which reveals when an object was last heated. He says this would probably date the firing of the clay to about 100 years ago, which would, of course, solve the mystery of the disc. Reluctance of the museum to do so, Eisenberg argues, shows that they prefer to maintain the hoax, as this generates attention and income for them. Although an alternative point of view is that thermoluminescence testing requires a lot of material and might incur significant damage to the artifact. The disc is a forgery. Resemblances between Phaistos symbols and other Minoan writing might be because Pernier used real sources to inspire his fake. But epigraphic scholar Brian Collis points out that the Archilachori axe was discovered after the disc, but seems to bear similarities. The fact remains that the Phaistos script is represented on other documents from Phaistos, and so the forgery hypothesis is unnecessary. Well, assuming it's genuine, the real mystery of the Phaistos disc is the apparent anachronism of the technology that created it. For proponents of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, the disc is a classic example of a technology out of time. And so it's striking evidence for the interpretation of an advanced extraterrestrial civilization in the Bronze Age world. But invoking space gods is entirely unnecessary to explain the one-off nature of the disc. According to historian Jared Diamond, the disc is proof that the march of technological progress is not smooth, it's not unidirectional, not irreversible. Apparently, it's possible to uninvent something. Despite the significant amount of effort and expertise that went into creating the wood blocks to print the disc, Not to mention devising the script they record, the artifact remains unique. The vast majority of Bronze Age people are illiterate, so maybe handwritten scripts such as Linear A and Linear B served well enough the limited needs of the tiny number of literate scribes. Block printing was too expensive and laborious to be economically or culturally viable, so that technology was discarded, and of the few instances of its use, only one has survived. And certainly that would make as much sense as anything else. Well, from the Phaistos disc, let's talk about something much easier to relate to. I'm talking about the Ark of the Covenant. The date's from about 623 BC. And of course, the location was Jerusalem in Israel. It's a wooden and gold box with strange powers, considered the most holy artifact of the ancient Jews before it mysteriously vanished. The Ark of the Covenant, also known as the Ark of the Testimony and the Ark of the Lord, was the chest in which they kept the original stone tablets of law that Moses brought down from Mount Sinai. But according to specifications dictated by God himself, it was an artifact of terrible power and awesome presence, sometimes appearing to have a will of its own. Its disappearance is one of the great mysteries of biblical history. There have been numerous, though often suspect and ideological motivated, claims to have tracked it down. Ark's the most holy piece of furniture ever made. According to the book of Exodus, God commanded Moses to build a chest or ark in which to house the tablets of law inscribed with the 10 Commandments, and gave very specific instructions. It's to be 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide and high. Time of Moses, the cubit in question was probably the royal cubit of Egypt, which was 21 inches, making the ark 4 feet 4 inches long and 2 feet 7 inches high, wide and deep, roughly the size of a coffee table. God instructed the ark was to be constructed from sedum wood, also known as setim wood, an expensive and durable kind of acacia, covered on both sides with gold, with a band of gold around the rim. 2 rods of gold-covered sedum, fitted into sets of gold rings on each side of the chest, allowed the ancient Hebrews to carry the ark with them on their wanderings, and when they stopped and made camp, they followed more divine instructions to set up a tent shrine known as the tabernacle or the sanctuary in which to house it. The tabernacle was a frame of planks and pillars of sedum wood with fixtures of brass, silver, and gold, draped with fabrics of linen and goat hair and leather, and it could be dismantled and used to help pack the ark. Most striking element of the ark was the capare, or cover, known as the mercy seat in later traditions, made of solid gold, cast into a plate of which projected 2 cherubims. And these aren't to be confused with the chubby babies of later eras. In the ancient Near East, cherubim were terrifying human-animal hybrids that mediated divine power. And cherubim of the cover of the ark probably resembled winged sphinxes, with the wings outstretched, nearly touching. The ark was constructed to hold the tablets of law, but other items supposed to be placed in the tabernacle and possibly in the ark itself. There was a golden vessel of manna from heaven, the rod of Aaron, which had undergone miraculous transformation. Placed either in or alongside the ark was also the book of law written by Moses. The tabernacle was finally superseded by the Temple of Solomon. The innermost sanctum, known as the Holy of Holies, was constructed along the same lines. According to the book of Kings, by this time the ark contained only the tablets. Well, the biblical records various manifestations of supernatural power attributed to the ark. Sometimes a mist or cloud appeared in the space between the wings of the cherubim on the mercy seat, and this was said to be the divine presence. In some passages, it seemed to be God himself manifesting there, for God would speak directly to Moses from the lid of the ark. And this fits in with other passages in which God seemed to identify himself as being one and the same as the ark. The ark was carried by the Hebrews and later by the Israelites when they went on campaigns or into battle and inspired terror in their adversaries. The ark helped topple the walls of Jericho, and when it was captured by the Philistines and taken to their camp, it brought up an open plague and woe until they returned it. It would glow and give off sparks, consume with fire those that displeased it, and strike down dead anybody who dared to touch it, as in the tale of the unfortunate Uzzah, reached out to stop the ark from toppling over as it was carried in procession. He was killed on the spot. When the ark was placed in the Holy of Holies, the book of Kings records a cloud filled the house of the Lord, and for the glory of the Lord filled the house of God. In the Bible, the ark was created in the year of the Exodus from Egypt. Traditional chronology of the Exodus is drawn from a passage in the book of Kings that states that the Exodus happened 480 years before Solomon built the temple. Solomon himself being dated by correspondence with a contemporaneous Egyptian pharaoh mentioned in the Bible. That dates to the construction of the ark to 1446 B.C., though many scholars dispute the history of the Exodus, and others argue that 1250 B.C. is a more realistic date. After its years of wandering and being kept in a tabernacle, King David made plans to house the ark in a magnificent temple to be constructed in his new capital, Jerusalem, gathering materials to that effect, but the actual construction of the temple was left to his successor, Solomon. In 966 B.C., according to the conventional biblical chronology, the ark moved into his new home, which remained its base for at least 300 years. And during that time, it was taken out to be carried on military campaigns or in processions, and occasionally be protected and hidden from wicked kings. 2 Chronicles provides the last biblical mention of the ark, recording that King Josiah ordered it to be brought back to the temple. The dates of Josiah's reign are considered to be firmly established, giving a reliable date for the last mention of the ark as 623 B.C. What happened to the ark after that is one of the great mysteries of history. The most plausible explanation is that it was carried off or destroyed by one of the succession of invaders and despoilers who conquered and or sacked Jerusalem, most notably the destruction of the first temple during the Babylonian conquest of 586 B.C. Nebuchadnezzar took Jerusalem, devastated the temple, and forced the Jews into exile in Babylon, and it's common practice for the idols and the artifacts of conquered people to be carried off as well, to be installed in the sacred precinct of Babylon as vassals of the dominant Babylonian gods. The Bible records the construction of the second temple 70 years later, but the ark isn't mentioned. When the Romans conquered Jerusalem in 70 A.D., according to the Romano-Jewish historian Josephus, the victorious general Titus found the second temple's Holy of Holies was empty. Friezes depicting the Roman conquest of Jerusalem clearly show artifacts being looted from the temple, but the ark was not among them. And there were traditions in the Talmud, the book of commentary on Jewish law and lore, suggesting the ark was hidden away, possibly by Josiah in expectation of the imminent Babylonian conquest. Modern theories about its resting place and claims to have located it rest on the belief the ark was hidden in a tunnel or cave underneath the Temple Mount, maybe in a cave overlooking the Dead Sea. Prophet Jeremiah said to have hidden the ark in a cave on Mount Nebo, now on the Jordanian side of the Dead Sea. The Copper Scroll, an extraordinary treasure map that forms part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, discusses sacred artifacts from the temple hidden in a similar location. Other suggested hiding places for the ark include the Hirlu Tara in Ireland, the Kaaba in Mecca, and the state of Utah in the U.S. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. I'll be back tomorrow and talk more about unsolved mysteries of history. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening.